Hello again, YouTubers. My last episode, I covered bottling 5 gallons of grape wine that I'd made. Since that time, I've gotten several requests online asking if I could show how to make smaller quantities, possibly 1 to 2 gallons, because 5 gallons was just a little bit too much. So today, I decided to make 2 gallons of apple plum wine. I'm diluting the plum juice with apple juice because the plum is just plain too sweet all by itself. 50-50 apple plum makes a really good combination. So, to begin, I'll cover exactly what you need to do the process. First thing you need is a couple of sterile 1 gallon containers with sterile airlocks and plugs. You need a large funnel for pouring your wine from your cooking pot into the jugs. Okay, I've got 1 gallon of plum juice, 3.2 pounds of sugar. Normally, you would add 1 teaspoon of tannic acid per gallon to give the wine a little bit of a tang, particularly fruit wines, because they don't have the natural tannin in the skin, in their skins like grapes have. If you don't have tannic acid, you can use concentrated black tea. The next things you need are acid blend, which is a blend of malic, citric, and tartaric acid. This helps the wine develop a little bit better flavor and also helps adjust the pH of your wine must. The rule of thumb is 1 teaspoon of acid blend per gallon will change your pH by 1 percentage point. The next ingredient you need is yeast nutrient. This helps the yeast to metabolize all the sugar in your wine and boosting your alcohol content. The final ingredients you need and tools are a teaspoon and a tablespoon, a good sterile stirring spoon, and finally, of course, your wine yeast. The yeast on the left is Red Star Pasture Red. This is good for Burgundies and other red wines. It will finish with an average alcohol by volume content of between 11 to 14%, depending on the starting specific gravity of your wine must. With this particular wine, I'm not going to bother with using a hydrometer or measuring starting or ending gravities. I'm just going to give you a basic recipe that will come out with a good quality, decent tasting wine. The second yeast you can use is Pasteur's Champagne yeast. Red Star has recently changed the name to Pasteur Chenin Blanc, probably to do with France's laws regarding what can and cannot be referred to as champagne. This will give your wine an average by volume alcohol content of between 17 and 20% by volume. So if you want to end up with a wine that's roughly 40 proof and will knock your socks off, use champagne yeast. If you want just a good strong wine that's about 4 or 5% alcohol higher than you get with normal jug wine, go ahead and use just Pasteur Red. That is a good wine. Now, first step we do is I have 96 ounces of preheated apple juice. You might be asking, well, you've got 1 gallon of plum juice, but less than a gallon of apple juice. How is it that you're going to make 2 full gallons? The answer is the 3.2 pounds of sugar I'm going to add. That'll make up the difference in volume. Plus, you want to have a little bit of headspace in your fermenting jugs so that your wine doesn't bubble over. So, next step in the process is preheated apple juice. I'm going to stir the sugar in, and we'll go from there. Okay, my stirring spoon has already been sterilized, but just in the interest of safety, I'm going to dip it again in the sterilizing solution. Give it a good shake off. A couple drops of sterilizing solution in your wine won't hurt anything, but of course you might want to try to get rid of as much of it as possible. Right now the wine must is about 170 degrees Fahrenheit. And slowly add the sugar, stirring it in. You want to stir until all the sugar is completely in solution, as much as possible. Yeast aren't that fussy. If there's a little bit of granulated sugar left in there that hasn't completely dissolved, the yeast will eat it anyway. But I always try as best as I can to get it completely dissolved. The next step is to add the tannin. Since I've just recently run out of dried tannin, I'm just going to use a couple of tablespoons of really strong black tea. If you don't have black tea, worst case scenario, you can peel about three or four acorns off of any oak tree, drop those in your jug until the wine's fermented. Although do make sure to get the acorns out before you bottle your wine. Since I'm making 2 full gallons, my next step is to add acid blend. Like I said, I'm not precisely measuring pH of the wine must because I'm not going for a really high quality wine. I just want ballpark good blend and good flavor. So I'm going to add 2 teaspoons, 1 teaspoon per gallon. If you spill a little extra in your wine, don't worry about it. It won't ruin anything. It'll just make the wine a little bit more tangy than you might expect. And if you let it age for a year or two, it'll precipitate out in the bottom of the bottle as wine crystals, which are harmless. To give the yeast a good head start, and get as much alcohol as possible in this batch, I'm adding a well-rounded, 2 well-rounded teaspoons of yeast nutrient. The instructions are roughly 1 to 1.5 teaspoons per gallon of wine must is a good amount of nutrient. You don't want to put too much nutrient in because you're just wasting it. You don't want to put too little in, or your yeast will starve to death before it gets done fermenting all the sugar in your wine. Once I have the yeast nutrient all stirred in and dissolved as well as possible, which doesn't always happen. Yeast nutrient likes to make little lumps, just like making gravy with flour. Now that the yeast nutrients dissolved, I'll start adding the plum juice. The plum juice itself is pasteurized and sterile, so there's no reason to pasteurize it again. I just pour it directly into the wine must, stirring as carefully as I can to get it as well mixed as possible. And the final bottle of plum juice, I'm going to pour half and half into the jugs. The reason I'm not mixing it all up is because it just makes it a lot more difficult to pour the wine into the jug later. And I'm going to ask my handy assistant to hold the airlock. I don't want to set it down because I don't want to get it contaminated. When you're pouring through a funnel, it helps to hold it up just a little bit so it doesn't form a tight seal on the bottle. If you form a tight seal, it tends to bubble and pop and just be annoying. Take the airlock back. Take that airlock. Okay, looks like I didn't get exactly half in each bottle, but this is close enough. 1 gallon of wine will have just a touch more plum taste than the other. Okay, next, well, I'm going to pour the apple plum mixture into the bottles.